Hi, y'all. This is Kristen Chenoweth.
Hi, I'm Gloria Stefan.
This is Sarah Bareilles.
Hi, I'm Patty Lapone.
This is Lin-Manuel Miranda. You're listening to the Broadway Podcast Network.
Welcome to the Theater Podcast, intimate personal conversations with theater's biggest names. I'm your host, Alan Seals, and this episode is with George Salazar. I've known this guy for a while. Met him about 2 years ago, I guess, and we've run into each other in the Broadway circles and worked together on a few projects. And just in the last year and a half, especially now with the pandemic and being isolated, his journey of self-discovery just got incredibly accelerated. And he tells a story, and it comes out of this whole works in process artists video that he made. Is commissioned by the Guggenheim. And he wrote about what he knows, which is growing up as a mixed race kid and having no idea where he fit. His father's Ecuadorian, his mother's Filipino. He didn't know literally which radio button to choose on standardized tests when it asks you what your race is. He didn't belong, and it was reminded of that fact by his peers quite frequently. But like a lot of people, he has a story of finding his tribe through theater. He accidentally discovered theater. I will attribute to Weird Al. You have to listen to the episode to figure that out. So thanks to Weird Al, he accidentally discovered theater, then went to University of Florida with a biology major before, of course, changing it and graduating with his degree in theater. But just a damn nice guy. I am honored to know him. Everybody, please leave a rating, leave a review for the podcast. Find me online, send me a message on Instagram or Twitter at theater_podcast. You can actually watch the video version of this on Patreon, ttp.fm/patreon, and the proceeds of that go to making more transcriptions and the ongoing production costs for running a podcast, which is not cheap. And now everybody, please enjoy this episode with George Salazar.
Here you go, 1, 2, 3.
Today's guest catapulted into the limelight after originating the role of Michael Mell in, well, all the U.S. productions of Be More Chill, which garnered him a Lucille Lortel Award before taking the show onto Broadway. In addition, his credits include off-Broadway's The Lightning Thief, the Percy Jackson musical, and most recently, the Pasadena Playhouse production of Little Shop of Horrors, of course, as Seymour. TV and film appearances include CBS's Bull, HBO's Divorce, NBC's Superstore, and is also currently starring as Sleazeball agent Maxwell Fernsby in Broadway's first original soap opera podcast radio play called As the Curtain Rises. I was trying to do my best Alex Brightman there.
It's very good.
Thank you. It's George Salazar. Welcome to the Theater Podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm so happy to be here, man.
Gosh, this is completely unrelated to you and me, but I'm on like this voiceover kick. I've been watching Big Mouth. Have you ever seen Big Mouth on Netflix?
Yeah, of course.
Like I feel like it's a masterclass in voiceover artistry by Nick Kroll.
It is. He's a genius. He's a master. Yeah, we are all lucky to have that.
My wife hates it when I do the, I forget what his name is, the old decrepit hormone monster.
Oh, yeah.
Ready. Anyway.
I think you found your calling.
Hey, my dudes.
Professional okay. Nick Kroll impersonator.
Yeah, I'm impersonating Nick Kroll, impersonating everybody else. All right, so back to George. You just put out something with the virtual commissions premieres, works in process artists, right?
Yeah.
Or is it, did I get that backwards? Works in process artists, virtual commissions premieres.
Yes, that's it.
Okay,
through our friends at the Guggenheim, yeah.
Yes. So what is the WPA for those who do not know?
So works in process, back in 2019, Works in Process invited Joe Iconis, myself, Stephanie Hsu, Will Rowland, Chase Brock and Stephen Brackett and Joe Trace over to the Guggenheim to have like kind of a little talk back discussion about the process of creating Be More Chill, couple years ago to bringing it to New Jersey, then kind of explaining the process of the show, going kind of viral on the internet, and then leading to the show finally making its New York premiere, and then eventually Broadway. And so once the pandemic hit, they were really wanting to get out and support artists. And what they ended up doing was reaching out to every artist who participated in a works in process at the Guggenheim, and offered a commission to basically say, like, you have carte blanche, create a video no more than 5 minutes long about whatever you want. It can be as personal or not personal as you want it to be. And send it over to us. And yeah, so it was their way of kind of helping to support artists who, during the shutdowns were kind of,
So your video that you made, it's like a couple seconds over 5 minutes. It's super wonderful and consumable. And it's called My Identity by George Salazar. And I thought it would be a wonderful place to kick off our conversation here, because I've heard you talk about this before on other podcasts, or even in person. I think we've talked about it once or twice, but like your personal identity being a child of you are mixed race. Your father is Ecuadorian, your mother's Filipino.
Mhm.
And I mean, I don't want to tell your story here. You're struggling to fit in your whole life, which I think most of us in theater kind of have been.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's, that's what initially as an artist, like, attracted me to Joe Iconis's work, is that he writes specifically for, those square pegs trying to fit into round holes, just what I used in that video. But, yeah, no, I think we all kind of struggle to fit in, and I think everyone's struggle is different, right? And so, when I was approached by Duke Dang at the Guggenheim to be a part of this, and to create something, there's that, like, old adage of write what you know. And, over the past couple months living through this pandemic, I really feel like it's been, one of the silver linings of it all is that I've been able to kind of, like, look within and grow as a person, right? Like, using this time wisely. And so, part of that had been, like, writing a lot about my own experience, and then also finally talking to my mixed race friends about their experiences, right? Like, I think it's something that we all kind of, I don't know, you always want to, like, put your best foot forward and represent yourself as, like, someone who has their shit together, but, like, sometimes you just don't. And so, I've had, like, a lot of really eye-opening and powerful conversations with friends of mine who I've known for, like, 10 years, right? And we just, like, we never really sat down to talk about being mixed race and all the identity crises that come from that. And so, that video that I created was kind of a culmination of the last couple months of me really, like, digging deep and trying to understand who I am and all of my complexity, and also, like, appreciate and value those things that used to make me feel like, a fish out of water and just, like, not able to fit in. I now, in my adult years, can look at those things and say, like, damn, I'm really glad that I am who I am. And yeah.
It's interesting to me, hindsight's always 2020, and literally here in 2021, it's actually literally 2020. But corny dad jokes aside, what I hear a lot interviewing people on the podcast is that what makes you different is what makes you special, and you're supposed to go into auditions. Like, their advice is to go into these auditions and make a choice and be yourself. And I forget who said it recently. It was somebody who was like, somebody went in and they left the audition and said, "Oh, I lost that audition. I screwed it up." And whoever I was talking to said, "Well, it wasn't yours to begin with, right? Like, if it's not yours, it's not yours. So be yourself." But along those lines, it's acting, performing, and I'm bringing this back to you too, as somebody who, as you said in your video, didn't know which bubble to fill in on when it asks you the question, literally what bubble to fill in of what race are you? And that stumped you and caused you anguish and stress for a long time, right? Because you chose one, and no matter who you chose, you would have, as you said in the video, erased one of your other parents.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's so much about you that kind of screams self-discovery and introspection. And I think part of this video, very much so, by the way, the notes for those listening, in the show notes, you can find the link to the video. But even Michael in the bathroom, it's about this kid who is just like aching to fit in. And now, you're in your mid-30s, and sorry, I was looking at your Wikipedia page. It's out there. So you were saying mid 20s, right? You're like just turned 21, 25. You can rent a car. But you've been through a lot, including publicly talking about vocal injuries, and now this ongoing identity crisis, for lack of existential identity questioning, right?
Yeah, sure.
And I guess where I'm going with all of this is your quest, your desire to be part of the stage and to be acting, like to get that validation or to get that approval that maybe you weren't allowing yourself to receive when you were growing up, or even as a young adult, feeling a little bit of imposter syndrome as you start to work the way up the ranks in theater and performing and working alongside these greats that you used to realize that you used to think you wouldn't have contact with. And now you're performing alongside them, but you still don't know who you are. Does that make sense? There's a question in there somewhere, and I'm trying to.
I think no, I'm with you. It took like many years, and I am now, I think, at the stage where I like feel empowered to share my like journey on the story of my journey. But I have a pretty solid understanding of who I am now. And so, what I'm wrestling with now is less of self-discovery and needing validation, and more, I've been really fortunate to be like allotted a platform through Be More Chill, right? And the perfect story to kind of sum up my whole mission now is that, when I was doing Be More Chill on Broadway, I would say, like, at the stage door, there were probably, throughout that whole run, 20 kids who looked like me at that stage door. And this kind of fueled my move to LA, initially. And it was this idea that, like, I realized growing up, my family, we weren't Broadway people. I didn't know what a Broadway musical was. It wasn't a part of our lives. And I realized it's because, my parents, they couldn't afford to fly us to New York and pay for hotel accommodations and buy these, really expensive Broadway show tickets for the whole family. Like, that just wasn't a part of our budget, right? Mm-hmm. And there are so many people out there who can't afford that. Our industry isn't really accessible to the people who, look at what theater has done for me, right? Like, I discovered it accidentally in high school. But if I hadn't, right, like, what would my life have been? Mm-hmm. And so, I just think about all the people, all the kids who look like I did, who are, looking for a place where they can fit in. And theater very much was a place for me, right? Like, I didn't have to, try to overcompensate one side of my upbringing over the other. I could just be me. And so I decided to move to LA, and I decided to try to do things here, because I realized people can't really afford to go see theater in New York, but everyone has a Netflix password.
Yeah.
Right. And I saw through Little Shop, actually, at Pasadena Playhouse, when I do the show and we come out the stage door, and there were suddenly like the whole line of people at the stage door looked like I did when I was young. And I was like, oh my God, this makes so much more sense. When the tickets are $40
Mm-hmm.
and not in New York City, when the tickets are $40, they come. They're here and they want it, right? And so I, in that moment, realized like, okay, like this next chapter of my artistry and my life, just as like a human being, a person, is to create for those people, so that they have someone who looks like them that they can look to and feel like anything is possible. And so that's kind of, that's where my journey has led me today. And like, that is what fueled that video, and creating that for Works in Process. I was so terrified, Alan, like I was so nervous about putting that out there. As I said, and as I say in the very beginning of the video, like I play other people, like I tell other people's stories, and to just like be so honest and vulnerable, and not really like ask people for advice about this video. Like I had a conversation with two friends about it before submitting it, not having like an entire crew of people, give me notes on it was really scary. And I had no idea what to expect. And I was fully ready for people to like not watch this video at all. And then I ended up getting like flooded with response from people who are mixed race and not, who felt like they really like were able to relate to the piece. And that made me very happy. And it also like made me feel less nervous about putting more out there. That's got more of a personal touch to it. So it was overall, I think, a really powerful process for me of like creating this thing. It was great for my family too. Like my parents my mom watches it every day.
That was my next question, was what their feedback was. Yeah.
Yeah, no, they loved it, and the video, it really is like a culmination of a couple of writing projects that I had been focusing on in the months prior to COVID ruining our lives. And then also throughout the pandemic, I'd been like writing a couple things and writing like specifically this really great piece about my parents meeting, which is like kind of a only in America, only in New York kind of a love story of like this like Filipino immigrant meeting an Ecuadorian immigrant. Like that just doesn't happen. Like it's a quintessential, it's called an American love story. That's like what the working title is right now, because it is like, it's an American love story. Like that's not a story that you hear in the Philippines or in Ecuador, right? Like it's so quintessentially American. And so, it's been like quite the eye-opening experience, and like and getting to share that with people and has just been like really such a treat and a really nice silver lining, amidst so much darkness.
Your mom watches it every day. I don't see why not. It's a beautiful, it's a love letter to your parents as much as it is sort of exposing, the own struggles that you've had. But did you talk about your own thoughts, I guess, with your parents before it or after it, or have they changed? Like the more that, I guess, just like any kid, I'm 40, and anything I put out that's personal, the first thing I always think of is, are my parents gonna like me? And I don't know if that's healthy or not, but it's still the first thing that I go to. And it's like ingrained in our head. So, and I had I was fortunate enough to have a pretty decent childhood. And, both parents were there and they came to all my soccer games. And being white, both parents are white, we never talked about race. But when I'm trying to get them to understand it or putting in anything personally vulnerable, that has to do with my own mental health, I always press send or enter or upload or whatever it is. And then I'm like, okay, when am I going to hear from my parents? That's my first response in my head. Like, did that happen with you, or did you talk about that beforehand? I assume many people have many different / better relationships with their parents about this kind of stuff.
Yeah. No, my parents, I interviewed them. I've asked them many questions, specifically when I was like starting to write that love story piece about them. I wanted to make sure that like I got, got everything right. I'm very familiar with their story at this point. And so they trust, I know they trust me and they trust my storytelling. And they are also the type of, they are the most supportive people. They're a bit more context, like growing up, everyone on my mom's side is like in the medical profession. My older sister's a dentist and my younger sister's an occupational therapist. So like our family is like heavily, deeply ingrained in like the medical field. And I had always wanted to be a surgeon. I always wanted to be a neurosurgeon. At one point, I wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon. And so when I decided to switch gears and become an actor, it took my parents, my mother was like, yeah, like immediately right off the bat. My dad was like, I'll pay for law school. At this point, they are both my biggest fans and biggest supporters. And, fortunately for me, like I don't ever feel that kind of anxiety. It's less that I know without a shadow of a doubt that no matter what I put out there, even if it's like complete shit, my parents are going to think it's a masterpiece. So that's nice.
Yeah. Well, so you've at least got two people in your corner no matter what you do.
Exactly.
We're going to take a short break. Stay tuned for more of the episode. I want to go back to what you said a second ago about accidentally discovering theater, because I don't think I've heard all of this story. And I know that well, you tell it. How did you accidentally just become this Broadway powerhouse?
Like I said, we were not like, the theater wasn't a thing. The closest thing to musicals that I ever consumed were like the Disney cartoon movies, specifically The Lion King. I just remember, I watched The Lion King once a week growing up. That was kind of as deep into musicals as I got. But I was always the class clown. I was always the like family comedian. When I was like 11, my parents, when we'd be at like, family friend's house for like a gathering or birthday party, they would always like say like, do your Bill Clinton impression. I was like 11 years old and I would just stand there and I would just go, I did not have sexual relations with that woman. And I really don't think it was a good impression, but of course my parents were just like, look at this kid, he's hilarious. And so like, there was always a bit of like a want to entertain. It never crossed my mind that is a thing that people could do. And it's not my parents' fault, right? It's just, it never crossed my mind that was I couldn't even grasp the concept of like doing that. So I was also a big nerd and a huge Weird Al fan. And
Me too.
used
Love
to,
Weird Al.
I used to write parody songs, and they were always like not safe for school, really vulgar, very graphic. I was always trying to like shock and like push the envelope with my friends. And I wrote this parody of Britney Spears' Hit Me Baby One More Time. And it was aptly called Hit Me Baby One More Time. And I sang it for my friends in a computer class very quietly. And the president of the drama club was a year older, but had skipped that class the year prior. So he had to take it again with a bunch of like, the younger students. Mm-hmm. So like we always like, we kind of just like, no one really talked to him because he was not in our year. And he came up to me and he was like, hey, I'm sure he said something like, that song was disgusting, but you're a good singer. You should come audition for Little Shop tonight after school. And I'd never auditioned, sung. I've sing for my friends, but like it was never like an actual thing. And he was really persistent throughout the day because like at the time, and there's like a picture of me around that age, I feel like. It was just like in the video, I was like really chubby. I looked like Manny from Modern Family. Like I was like just so round. My face was just like, it was really round. And my routine after school every day was to just go home and watch like Maury Povich or Jerry Springer and binge eat like pizza rolls. Like that was my like thing, which is why I had such a round face. And he was persistent and he was like, come. I'll walk you through everything. He wanted to be Seymour. He thought that I would be a great plant. And then it ended up that I was cast as Seymour and he was cast as the plant. Uh-oh. And that's how I fell into it. I was just really fortunate to be surrounded by, I had a drama teacher, she's since passed away, but Ann Harris, I remember she had a parent-teacher conference with my parents and she said, Mr. and Mrs. Salazar, there are like 1 million doctors in the world, but there's only one George. And like, yes, if he was a doctor, he could change the world, but he's really special. And like, I think you guys should like let him pursue this as a career. My father being a musician knew how hard the artist's life is. And he didn't want that for me, right? He just wanted me to be really comfortable and not ever have to struggle. And so he was a little resistant for a while. And then I ended up moving to New York and, of course, like I made my Broadway debut in Godspell and, things like that start happening. And then he started coming around and now they're just the most supportive, my biggest fans. But that's so how cool. I accidentally fell into theater.
So you said it was in high school that you auditioned. Yeah. What grade was that? Do you remember?
It was junior year.
So
all my friends are like, yeah, I went to like theater camp when I was 7 and
right.
Great. I started so late. Right. And so I also had a bit of a learning curve too, because again, like I didn't have voice lessons growing up. Like I didn't start taking voice lessons until I was in college and it was paid for in my tuition. You know what I mean? Like my parents, obviously, if I wanted voice lessons, I think they would have found ways to make it happen because they, I had piano lessons, I took guitar lessons, I took drum lessons. But the reality is like, all these people, all these friends of mine were like, yeah, I started taking voice lessons when I was 6 and it just wasn't my story, So I think a lot of people, when they arrive to New York, they want to have their shit together, right? But I have to tell you that the bulk of my learning and growing was not in college. It was on a job site in New York City.
Absolutely.
Doing Be More Chill every night taught me so much. And by that point, I was 12 years into being in New York.
Well, I want to come back to that because there's a lot to unpack there. But the reason I asked about what grade you were in is I was wondering if it was junior year, because that's that year when basically you're expected to decide what you're going to be for the rest of your life, more or less, right? You're not even out of high school yet, and you have to decide all of a sudden what you want to be and then go to college for it and then get a job afterwards. So junior year, you start doing the fairs and the tours, and some people even start doing the preliminary applications and whatnot. So had you at that point already had shortlisted your med schools or the path towards neuroscience or neurosurgery, and then all of a sudden you're just like, nope, screw it, I'm out. I got to start researching theater schools?
Yeah, I mean, financially, I was kind of locked into Florida. I did the International Baccalaureate program in high school. And the state of Florida at the time had a huge scholarship program through the Florida Lottery called Bright Futures. And Bright Futures awarded basically anyone who graduates with an IB diploma got a full ride scholarship to a state school.
Wow.
So I was essentially trapped in Florida, which was fine. My sister went to the University of Florida for pre-dent. And I just fell in love with that campus every time we'd go to visit her. And so, if I had to choose a state school, I was going to go to the University of Florida. And I did apply as a bio major.
Standby. What? Your socks are right there where you left them. Thank you.
So sweet.
Write down the time code.
No, leave it in. That's so sweet.
Dad lied.
I'm insisting you leave it in.
Okay. All right. So where were we?
Yeah. So the state of Florida had this scholarship through the Florida Lottery that gave you a full ride scholarship to a state school. So I was trapped in Florida, but I did apply as a biology major and got in. Got the full ride scholarship, thank God, right? Because so many of my friends go to these huge musical theater schools where, yes, they get the phenomenal training, right?
And they have huge debt.
And the casting directors all graduated from those schools too, right? So there's there's you almost get a little bit of a sense of somewhat of a job security in an industry that has no job security, right? Here I was going to school in Florida where my professors, they were teaching and preparing us for a New York that existed in 1983. It was not the New York we know, right? It was not New York post Disney theatricals. It was New York 1983, where you don't take the subway at night.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was how the kind of college hunt went for me. I remember telling my dad, I want to apply to NYU for theater. And this was still at the time where he was don't go into theater, that you're not going to make any money. It's going to be, again, these are valid concerns from immigrants who moved here, right? Mm-hmm. My father knows better than anyone. He was a drummer in the 80s. He had a rock band in Staten Island, New York, the Culprits. And they were good, and he's an amazing drummer, and it just didn't click. He had me when he was 26. So it's probably my fault.
Are you the oldest of everybody? No, you said your sister's oldest.
I am his oldest kid, yes.
Oh, wait, I thought you said you have an older sister. Okay, so you're older.
I do have an older sister. We have different dads.
Gotcha.
That's part of the love story of my parents. But yeah, no, I remember it was my senior year of college. I did Sunday in the Park with George. I played George, and after that, he was I ran into him in the atrium of our school university theater, and he was like crying, and he hugged me, and he said, I get it now.
Oh.
And, up until that point, my father had seen me in shows where I was, other than Little Shop when I was the lead, he saw me in a lot of shows where I was, on stage for like 4 minutes. And I think equated that to like my worth as an artist and individual. And he's got to see me be the lead in a musical in my last year of college, and he just like understood it. And so, yeah, he's now, like I said, they're my biggest fans and supporters.
Did you graduate with the biology degree?
No, I didn't. I ended up switching to musical theater.
Okay. Because I think that would be super cool. I mean, your path obviously is super cool anyway, but if you could just I was going to ask you to spit out some biology facts for me.
Yeah, no. I got into the school, and then shortly after that, I switched majors. Yeah. So I didn't even start biology.
Did your general requirements, yeah. So then, out of college, obviously, did you go to New York straight after college and show up and say, "Hello, world, here I am"?
Yeah. So being in this body and being not quite Latino, not quite Asian, and in the South where I went to school, every summer everyone would audition for summer stock jobs, and these are theaters that do your carousels and Oklahomas and Seven Brides for Seven Brothers outdoors, stuff like that there's not going to be a role for me, right? We're also talking the South, right? Even theaters in the South are racist. So I never got summer work. And so what I would do instead was intern in New York City, because I knew that that's where I needed to be. I knew that I would never work as an actor staying in the South. I'd work at a theme park. I'd be in a either Chip or Dale costume, sweating my balls off, being surrounded by screaming, crying children. That was that would have been it. So I would intern in New York, and my first internship was into my junior year of college with a general management firm, Martian Entertainment. And at the time they did Title of Show, Off Broadway, Altar Boys. And then in my summer leading into senior year of college, I interned for Bono Brian Brown, who's big Broadway press office. And they actually covered Be More Chill, which was really cool. So it was a kind of a full circle thing for me. But yeah, as soon as I graduated, I was I need to get out of here. I need to get up to New York immediately. So I think I spent 4 weeks with my parents, and then my mom wrote me a check for $900, which covered my first month of rent. And I moved to New York.
It's so cheap.
It's so cheap. It was a studio.
Yeah.
It was a studio in Sunnyside. $900, and that was it. $900, literally a check for $900, 2 suitcases, and a dream. And that was all I had. And I had to get it together and work really hard to be seen and heard.
That's been my experience from the educational standpoint. I got a computer science degree. Then with that degree, started performing, because why not? And I felt at the time where I was at a great disadvantage, I guess talent-wise and training-wise, because others had the camp since they were 7 and the training since they were 10 and whatnot. And I had always just gotten into computers. But where I had the advantage was, and what allowed me to keep up with them, was that I understood the business side of it, the tech side of it, because this was mid 2000s when everybody needed to have a website, and you had to make sure you had a digital presence, and they were just starting to take auditions via we used camcorders and recorded ourselves. Webcams weren't really quite a thing yet, but you had mentioned that, your teachers prepped you for like the 1984 of New York, but did you show up to New York then thinking, I guess, realizing what you needed to do because of the internships, or what kind of tipped you off to know that you were missing that business side of things?
Well, that was the goal with those internships, right? The first internship I took was eye-opening, and I learned so much, and I realized that I was going to be graduating and moving to New York with an advantage over my classmates, because I was, within one summer, I knew how to get around New York City. I knew all the neighborhoods. I knew how the business worked on the inside. Like, I had that insight. So whatever I lacked in skills or training, rather, training. Whatever I lacked in training, I definitely had in, okay, especially that second internship working for Bono Bryan Brown, like, I really learned how to not give an interview. Like, I watched people give really bad interviews. And so I realized that, there is like, obviously I have more training to acquire, and I got to keep working on my craft. But there's this whole other side of the business and the industry that, like, no one told me about at school. And so, I think, look, I've always had to, like, rely on my personality. Like, growing up, like, I wasn't like, I didn't have looks. I wasn't like, a child model by any means. And so I learned very early how to kind of rely on my personality. And at times it was a defense mechanism, but, through the years, I've learned how to, like, kind of pivot that and, like, use it as less of a defense mechanism and more of, like, it's actually become who I am, right? Like, I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. And
speaking of giving bad interviews,
let's just have some silence of dead air. The what you were saying, Seneca, the using your personality. I was literally having a conversation with a close friend of mine this morning about this sort of thing, and especially in the acting world, I'm resistant to using the term empathic, like empathetic. One who is an empath, right? And I think it's kind of a hokey word, but yet at the same time, I think there's a lot of truth to it, and it's the ability to walk into a room and, like, you're connected with with strangers. You're connected with surroundings. You can tell who's happy. You can tell who's sad. You can kind of read the room in a personality-based way. And it sounds like you exactly relied on that experience to mask insecurities, to mask the kind of identity crisis, and deflect from people really seeing who you felt or seeing what you felt in the inside, right?
Yeah.
And being more so able to redirect and adapt yourself to who they are. And so it's hard now to unlearn that behavior, speaking from personal experience, and just be yourself. And then, going back to what we were talking about at the beginning, be okay with everybody accepting you for who you are, and being okay with putting it out there.
Yeah, I remember very, very vividly the exact moment where I cut the strings off of my arms, like cut the marionette strings off of me, and freed myself from the need for validation. And it happened in such a strange way. I was with Nick Blameyer. We got stoned, and we were throwing ideas around, writing ideas, and we sat in a oh crap, what is that store?
WeWork? IKEA?
No, it's a furniture store. West Elm. We sat in the West Elm on the Upper West Side. And we sat in like in one of those like staged living rooms, like the demo living rooms that they have. We sat in one, and we were so stoned. We sat across from each other. We were throwing ideas back and forth.
I just think
And
it's funny though
Nick
that I'm sorry to interrupt, you get stoned and go to West Elm. But anyway, continue.
I don't know why we ended up in there. I think we just wanted to sit.
Right.
So we went to West Elm, and we were throwing ideas around. And of course, like, what can I draw from in my own personal experiences? And Nick asks me completely out of the blue, why do you only date white guys? And I was like, it like knocked the wind out of me. And this is like a whole nother layer of the identity crisis, right? Of like, growing up, I grew up in surrounded by a lot of Filipinos and a lot of Latinos. And I, as I say in the video, really struggled with how much of one, how much of the other. Is there a way to be both? I don't know. Like the Latinos, I was called a coconut in high school because I was brown on the outside, white on the inside. The Filipino kids would always say, like, when my parents would meet another Filipino family, and then we would all hang out, and the kids, I don't think they meant any disrespect, but they would ask, like, you don't look Filipino. And I would have to explain, it's like I spent my whole life like explaining myself. And then I started, then I weirdly was just like, felt around, there's also this obsession with my my mother's side of the family with like white beauty and white culture. I think this is a very like Asian thing.
That's very Asian. Yeah.
There's a lot of like skin bleaching products in the Asian skincare world. And so, that definitely like played a huge role in things. But I, in that moment, started to kind of decolonize my mind, and like it really felt like a moment where like I was liberated from the need for validation, specifically from white people. In this business, 99.9% of the time, my employers are white. So there is a really wild need for validation from white people in the industry. And it was at that moment where I was like, Nick and I had done Tick Tick Boom together. This was like, I think 2017. I was like out of a really like terrible, abusive relationship, and was like starting to find my footing again. And that was a moment where I was suddenly like, I don't have anything to prove. Like I have nothing to prove at this point. I have to just trust that what I have is unique to me and is all I need. I just need to continue being like a good person. I have to continue creating for other people, and I need to stop worrying about other people accepting me. I need to like be ready to accept myself. And it was a huge turning point in my like personal growth, was having that stoned brainstorm session with Nick Blameyer in a West Elm on the Upper West Side. And it all stemmed from this question of, why do you only date white guys?
So 2017 was, I think that was between Off-Broadway and Broadway Be More Chill, right? Or was that No, that was right when Be More Chill was starting to get popular on the internet. So this was before, because we brought Be More Chill to New York and Off-Broadway in the fall of 2018. So this was just as things were starting to get like really, really intense with Be More Chill.
in terms of my artistry, this lined up right before doing The Lightning Thief. And The Lightning Thief is a moment in my personal process as an artist when things felt very different. And it was the first time where I felt like I wasn't, I was actually encouraged by Stephen Brackett to just like listen to my impulses and just like create. And I ended up tapping into like a wavelength mentally that I had never experienced before in an artistic process. And it changed everything for me. Like it changed how I approach a character. It changed how I developed a character. I felt like my brain was firing like a million beats a minute, and it was really cool. Like I felt like I was like, that part of the Matrix when like Neo he finally like awakes. Yeah, and and everything around him becomes the Matrix, right? And he sees the digits forming the agents and stuff. That quite literally is what happened to me. And it was when I was able to like free myself from the expectation that I'm creating, right? Like I'm creating expectations that I think other people have of me. And I just threw it all out the window and said, I'm just going to do it, And so what I ended up creating with The Lightning Thief was like really powerful and exciting for me. And it was my first time getting like nominated for an award in New York. And it was all because I really do think it was all because of like a kind of a series of events that kind of led me towards realizing my fullest potential, and that it has nothing to do with other people's perception of me or their opinion of me, and everything to do with like how much I trust myself. And so, this is an ongoing thing because I left New York and moved to LA just when I feel like I was finding my footing as a theater artist. And now I'm like, trying to find my footing in front of a camera. And I'm now also trying to like find my footing in a recording situation for voiceover work. And like, I feel like I'm like learning all this stuff all over again. But as a human being, as a George Salazar, I feel like I know who I am now. And that strong sense of self, I think, is the thing that I was lacking for the many years when I was like stumbling and tripping and falling.
I was wondering,
but that's life, right?
Yeah, I was wondering what came first, if it was like the Be More Chill stardom or the self-discovery. Because I don't think you would be the person you are now, which is so self-aware and introspective, if you hadn't had that stoned experience at a West Elm. Because my guess is that carrying forward into the fame that Lightning Thief and then Be More Chill brought you, it would have amplified the need to please or the expectations that you were, in essence, just putting on yourself.
Yeah. Yes, 110%. I always said, because when I was doing Godspell, and I was like meeting Broadway people, and was meeting a lot of people who like just graduated college and booked a Broadway show, I always looked at that and was like, I'm so happy for those people, but I would never want that to be my story. I've been really fortunate in that every step, every trip, every fall, every success, every failure, I like fully embrace, because I feel like all those things help to create the person we are in the now. Mm-hmm. I never would have wanted to like, make a Broadway debut right out of college, because there's where do you go from there?
Except down.
More or less. You can go up. You can keep going up, but like that's God, But coming from the University of Florida to New York City, working at a seafood restaurant when I'm very allergic to shrimp. I worked at Bubba Gump Shrimp Company in Times Square for like 3 years. Like working that terrible, terrible job that was so soul-sucking, but so necessary, like doing a national tour of a non-equity company of a musical and doing 72 cities in 6 months, which equates to like, many one-nighters of like not getting any sleep and just being on a bus all day, and then expected to like go do a show full out, like every step along the way just helped prepare me for the next step. Instead of like arriving and being like, Broadway, oh shit! Just because you do one Broadway show doesn't mean you're going to be on Broadway for the rest of your life, And I think we've learned like I lost my equity insurance back in October, which I think is like really telling of the industry and like our country in general. But like the fact that like I was in a Broadway show the year prior and then now had no insurance was really crazy, So every step along the way makes us who we are. And yeah, man.
Well, I cannot wait to hear and see more from you. I mean, it's because you're going down this path and writing, journaling, expressing yourself in the way that you are is going to take you to a place that you've never been before. And like you just said, this video that you put out for Works in Progress, it's the first where, as you said, you're putting it out there. It's yours, no notes from big teams, and it felt good. And learning from that, you're going to do more and you're going to do better. And I'm so excited to know what you've got in store. Don't tell us now. Of course, we want to be like totally surprised when it comes out. But I just think you are such a great person to get to know, and in the multiple ways we've worked together. And I'm excited. I'm excited for all your success. I'm excited for just even all your internal work. I'm trying so hard to like figure out who I am and all the internal workings of being a father and being this and being that, and to talk to somebody who at least is heading down that same path. We're never going to get to the end, but it's experiencing the journey along the way. And
yeah, it's experiencing the journey. It's enjoying the journey as well. Like, life is hard.
Oh God, yes.
For everybody. And I think like, you can either let it ruin and destroy you or it can like excite you, thrill you, and push you to work harder. In your art, in whatever your work is, but also like just as a person, right? We can all afford to be better people.
Always learn, always keep an open mind, always just listening. That's what makes a great actor. That's what makes a great friend. I think that's what makes a great business relationship. You just listen. That's it. And I think this is a wonderful segue into our final 3 questions that I close out every episode with. The first one, and you may have just answered it, is what motivates you?
Yeah. What motivates me changes all the time. But right now in this moment, I have, and they make special cameos in the video, but I have 3 gorgeous mixed race nieces and a very handsome mixed race nephew. And so what motivates me now is to kind of try to lead the charge and try to create a place for them in the entertainment zeitgeist kind of world, so that they don't feel like aliens.
I like that.
That's my motivation.
So then the next question is, what advice would you give to your younger self and younger people listening now, starting out down a similar path?
I would tell them to start the self-acceptance journey sooner.
Yes.
Stop trying to please other people. Stop trying to live up to other people's ideas of what you should be, and just start learning to love and accept yourself. It's a lifelong journey for everyone. Even the most attractive people can feel empty inside sometimes, So it's, I would just say start the acceptance, self-acceptance part of the journey ASAP. That means, for me, I would tell young George, like, come out of the closet sooner. Just come out of the closet sooner.
When did you come out?
I came out to my mom in college. I didn't come out to my dad until I was 30. And my parents are married. So my mom had to keep that secret for a long time.
Yeah, that's pressure.
That's a lot of pressure. I just would have done it. I would have done it earlier.
So then the last question is, if you could only see one show for the rest of your life, but you can see it as many times as you want, what would you see?
Oh my God. In this moment, would see Norbert Leo Butz and Sherry Renee Scott in the last 5 years at Lincoln Center. I believe that's where they did it. Yes, I think they did it there. I would see that show every night for the rest of my life.
Norbert,
and they can be themselves in the early 2000s when they did it, or they can be like current Sherry and current Norbert. They can still do it, I'm sure. I'll take them at any stage.
Okay. So everybody, please check the show notes. Watch My Identity by George Salazar. And there's a full playlist of his videos and everybody else's videos as well for the works and process artists. Visit him online at thegeorgesalazar.com. Of course, Instagram and Twitter at George Salazar. Is that everything? Did I leave anything out?
No, that's it. I will say, because the URL of my website makes me sound like an asshole, but it's only because georgesalazar.com was already taken. And then years later, the owner of that domain tried to sell it to me for like $10,000, which is insane. So that's the only reason why it's the George Salazar. It sounds very douchey. The URL of my website doesn't sound like it would come from the person that you've gotten to know over the last, episode of this podcast. So I just want to make that clear.
All right. Well, on behalf of all my listeners, we forgive you.
Thank you.
So you can get more of me on Instagram and Twitter at theater_podcast. I'm on facebook.com/official theater podcast. Please leave a rating, leave a review, tell your friends. This has been edited by Matthew Hendershot, music by Jukebox the Ghost. And George, thank you most of all. This has been so fun, so enlightening. And I was telling my friend this morning when I was talking to him, I said, I'm so looking forward to this conversation because I feel like you and I are just on the same path, and I cannot wait for COVID restrictions to lift so that we can get together and have a drink and get stoned and just talk about it and talk about life, experience the journey together.
Love. I can't wait. Thank you for having me, Alan.
Take a deep breath, make the world a little colorful.